Hey rich girls, Kirby here, and today I wanted to spend some time talking to those of you who may need a little encouragement or guidance on how to become financially independent. Now, hopefully this isn't the first time you're hearing this, but becoming financially independent is the single most important thing that you can do to make sure you are living the life that you actually want to live. If you are financially independent, it makes it a lot harder for someone else to get you to stay in an abusive relationship. If you're not relying on someone else's income, then you don't have to listen to their opinions about what you spend your hard-earned money on. If you're paying your own rent, or better yet, own your own home, then you don't have to abide by someone else's house rules or curfews, and you can decorate your space however you like. Better yet, you can choose to live wherever you want to. Yes, being financially independent certainly comes with its own stressors and responsibilities, but it also allows you a sort of freedom that women could only dream of 100 years ago. So let's get into the 5 steps you need to take to become financially independent. Step 1, you need to have consistent and reliable income. Being able to count on a certain amount of income coming into your bank account every month is the most important and sometimes hardest step that people encounter. While owning your own business can be amazing, the freedom it allows you, the potential for limitless income, many people underestimate the power of having a steady job with consistent hours and consistent income. Unless you are relying on a partner or a family member to help with the bills, which is the opposite of being financially independent, you need to be able to count on a certain amount of baseline income every single month to cover the bare minimum expenses to live, like rent, groceries, and utilities. Now, we'll circle back around on changing careers or starting a business because that's one of the best things about being financially independent. You are giving yourself the ability and the breathing room to pivot and make big life changes if you have savings to fall back on. Step 2, you need to have healthcare coverage that is not attached to anyone else's plan. If you are under the age of 26 and choose to stay on mom and dad's family plan, even if you pay your portion of the bill every month, you are still at the mercy of someone else's employment status. Not to be a Debbie Downer, but God forbid something happened and the person with insurance lost their job or filled out their enrollment forms wrong at the end of the year. What happens if you don't find out until you have to go to the hospital? What happens if they let you know a week before coverage ends, but you just switched jobs and you won't be eligible through your employer for another 6 months? Having health insurance through your employer or paying out of pocket is the only way to ensure that you are in control of your own health care coverage. Now, let me give a little bit of a caveat here. I'm married and my husband and I are currently on the same healthcare plan. We're on a family plan. Technically, I would consider that not to be financially independent. I'm breaking my own rule here. Now, I justify this because we both have the option and the ability to be covered under our own employers separately. And worst case scenario, we could pay out of pocket for private health insurance. Now, we choose to have a single family plan because it's less expensive. But if it came down to it, we have the ability and the means to attain our own separate health insurance. If, on the other hand, I had no job and relied on my husband for both the income and the health insurance through his employer, what happens if he decides to quit his job and move to Antarctica? I'm now left with no money to pay rent. I'll be dropped from his health insurance with no way to pay for private health care since I don't have a job, and I'll basically be left scrambling to start from scratch at step 1. Is that fair? No, but that is why thinking all of these things through will help you out in the future. Step 3, renting or owning a space that is in your own name. Once you have stable income and have secured your own health insurance plan, the next step is to find a place that you can rent in your own name. Typically, you will need to show consistent income coming into your bank account in order to rent or even get a mortgage, which is why that was covered in step 1. But you will also want to make sure you are not paying too much in rent every month compared to your income. Now, the general rule of thumb here is to spend between 25 and 30% of your income on your rent or mortgage. However, that number is really going to fluctuate based on where you live and what your living arrangements are. For example, if you are single and you live in a small town that doesn't have super expensive rent, you don't have pets, and let's say you like to travel a lot, you can probably get away with living in a smaller place for a lot less money. If you could swing spending only 15 or 20% of your income on rent, that will make it a lot easier to reach the rest of your financial goals more quickly. On the other hand, if you live in a big city and you need more space for children or pets, or maybe you work from home some of the time, you may find yourself paying closer to 30 or 35% of your income in rent. As long as you can budget accordingly, which we'll get to in step 5, you do not always need to follow the guidelines just because someone with a podcast, hello, it's me, says that you do. These are not hard and fast rules. Having said that, if you find you are spending 40% or more on rent, it may be time to look for something less expensive. If you have unused rooms and you could potentially downsize and save money without it being a huge issue, it may be in your best financial interest to do so. Again, one of the best parts about being financially independent is getting to make your own decisions about where you live and how much rent you are willing to pay. If you're on the lease with somebody else, it's a lot more difficult to downside or decide to move halfway through a lease. Even worse, if you aren't on the lease at all, you might have someone else calling the shots. Imagine somebody locking you out of their apartment. I've definitely heard a few pop songs referring to just this. Having a space to call your own that no one can lock you out of is worth it for the peace of mind and sense of safety, if nothing else. All right, moving on to step 4, fully funding your emergency fund. Now, I have an entire episode on this that I will link here, but let's go over the basics. An emergency fund is something that you use in case of emergencies that is highly accessible and only available to you. I recommend having at least 6 months worth of expenses saved in cash, in a bank account, in your own name, preferably held in a high yield savings account. That way you're also getting some extra interest to add to that account. Now, this covers you in case of a job loss, in case of injury or unexpected hospital stay, in case of a natural disaster, perhaps before your insurance starts to pay out. And while it may not cover everything forever, it's only 6 months worth of expenses after all, it does give you option. It gives you time to get back on your feet, and it gives you independence. Now, I generally recommend only including your needs when figuring out your monthly expenses. Think rent, food, gas, etc., which typically works out to about 80% of your overall monthly budget. So using very rough numbers here, if your monthly expenses typically total $3,500, you will want to multiply that by 0.8%, which comes to $2,800. And then you want to multiply that by 6 to get a grand total of $16,800. That emergency fund would cover your needs for 6 months. A pretty good start, in my opinion. If you want to be a bit crazy, you could bump that up to your full monthly expenses for, let's say, 9 months, which would total $31,500. Definitely not necessary, but certainly not a bad thing to have. And it may help you sleep a little bit better at night. Having a fully funded emergency fund means you don't have to worry about random shit popping up in life that you weren't prepared to pay for. Because guess what? cars break down and people get laid off, and life is going to life. Having funds set aside for these inevitable yet unplannable life events could mean the difference between having to move in with family members or even taking a less desirable job because you couldn't wait a few extra weeks to look for better opportunities. All right. Our fifth and final step, sticking to a budget and living within your means. And this is usually the step that people get stuck in and they just cannot get past it. Now, I do have an entire episode on how to create a budget that you will actually be able to stick to, and I will list that below. But essentially, what you need to do is figure out all of your income that comes in every month and map out expenditures. They're going to be your fixed and your variable. Fixed expenses are going to be expenses that happen every single month and they're always the same. So that's going to be stuff like your rent or mortgage, any loan payment. So if you have car loans or student loan payments, things like a phone bill, if you pay the same exact amount in a phone bill every month, things like that. They're fixed expenses that you know happen every single month on the same day. Now you're also going to have things like variable expenses, and those are where you're going to have to play around a little bit. I typically recommend going back in your bank statements and your credit card statements to figure out how much you spend on literally everything in your life. And you can just categorize it out. Things like going out to eat, things like groceries, getting your hair done, spending money on clothes. You also need to account for miscellaneous items. These are going to be things like getting birthday presents for mom and dad, getting Christmas presents at the end of the year, paying property tax on your car if you live in a state that has that kind of thing. These are the kind of miscellaneous expenses that you need to kind of average out as to what you've done in the past before you can predict what you're going to be able to spend in the future. Now, the reason I say that this step can be done in conjunction with step 4 is because you're gonna want to figure out how much you can save for your emergency fund each month, but you also need to figure out what your expenses look like. So while you're sitting down and going through your monthly expenses, let's say aside from saving for your emergency fund, you have monthly expenses of $3,500. So let's say on a monthly basis, you typically spend $3,500, and that includes your fixed and your variable expenses. But that does not include you saving for your emergency fund. Again, using that past example, let's say that in order to save up, let's say you land on a number of $18,000. That's what you want to save for your emergency fund in total. Now, of your $3,500 in monthly expenses, let's say you bring in $4,000 a month, you have a difference of $500. Now, you may not want to save that whole thing for your emergency fund. Let's say you want to do $300 a month. Well, now you're going to include that in your monthly expenditures. So let's see. We're going to save $300 a month. We're going to put that aside in a high yield savings bank account in your own name. So after 12 months, you'll have $3,600. And if you do it in a high yield savings account, let's say you get about 4% a year, we're going to multiply 0.04. Actually, no, we're going to multiply 1.04 times 3,600. So you've saved $3,600 of your own money in this high yield savings account, giving you 4%. So at the end of the year, you would have an additional $144 in that account in interest. So I'm just going to go ahead. We're going to do just simple math right now. I'm going to divide 18,000 by 3744. So it would take you almost 5 years, 4.8 years to save up $18,000 in an emergency fund. Yes, that does seem like a lot of time, and it is a lot of time, but by starting now and getting that plan in place, you'll get there quicker than if you keep putting it off and off and off. All right, I know I said that we were going to get into a bonus step on how to pivot and make big life changes. I think we're going to save that for another episode. So if that is something that you would be interested in having an episode on, something you'd be interested in listening to, please let me know. You can shoot me an email. I have a link down below, or you can comment on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I love you guys so much. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening, and I will see you guys next Monday. Now, I will have a little bonus YouTube video coming out, but next Monday I will not have a new regular podcast coming out. So if you listen on Apple Podcasts, I will see you 2 weeks from now. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon. Later.